I stepped into the kitchen, my muscles still aching from a long day of personal training sessions. The aroma of roasted chicken filled the air, but the tension was even thicker. Evelyn, my mother-in-law, stood at the stove, her back rigid as she stirred a pot with unnecessary force. "Jenna, dear," she said without turning around, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I hope you're not too tired to set the table. Eli works so hard, you know." I bit back a retort. "Of course, Evelyn. Happy to help." As I reached for the plates, Evelyn sked. "Not those, dear. The good china. We're not savages, after all." I closed my eyes, counting to 10 before responding. "Right, the good china for a Wednesday night dinner." The front door opened, and Eli's voice called out, "I'm home!" "In here, darling," Evelyn chirped, her entire demeanor changing as her son entered the kitchen. Eli kissed his mother's cheek, then turned to me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Hey, babe, how was your day?" Before I could answer, Evelyn interjected, "Oh, Eli, you must be exhausted. Sit down, let me get you a drink." I watched as my husband allowed himself to be fussed over, sinking into a chair at the table I'd just set. "Actually," I said, "I had a great day. I signed on 3 new clients and—" "That's nice, dear," Evelyn interrupted, placing a glass of whiskey in front of Eli. "But let's not bore Eli with talk of your little job. He's had such a long day at the office." Eli took a long sip of his drink, not meeting my eyes. I felt my jaw clench but forced a smile. "You're right, Evelyn. Eli, how was your day?" As Eli launched into a story about a big sale he'd closed, I busied myself helping Evelyn bring the food to the table. Just as we sat down to eat, Evelyn's phone buzzed. "Oh, excuse me," she said, glancing at the screen. "I need to take this. Start without me, dears." She stepped into the hallway, her voice dropping to a whisper. I couldn't make out most of what she was saying, but one phrase came through clear as day. "That gold digger thinks she's fooling us all." My fork clattered against my plate. Eli looked up, concern flashing across his face. "You okay, Jenna?" I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Evelyn returned moments later, all smiles. "So sorry about that. Now, where were we?" The rest of the dinner passed in a blur. I pushed food around my plate, my appetite gone. As soon as it was polite, I excused myself to do the dishes. Standing at the sink, I could hear Evelyn and Eli talking in low voices in the living room. I strained to make out their words, but all I caught was Evelyn saying, "Need to protect our family's assets." My hands shook as I scrubbed a plate with unnecessary force. How had we gotten here? When Eli and I had decided to move in with Evelyn after his father's death, it had seemed like the right thing to do. She was lonely, and we could save money for our own place. But in the 3 months since, it felt like my entire world had shrunk to this suffocating house and Evelyn's constant criticism. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I wouldn't let Evelyn's words get to me. I wouldn't let her drive a wedge between Eli and me. We were a team, weren't we? As I dried my hands, I made a decision. I would talk to Eli tonight, lay everything out in the open. We'd find a way to make this work, to keep our family together, despite Evelyn's interference. But when I walked into our bedroom later that night, Eli was already asleep, his back turned to my side of the bed. I stood there for a long moment, watching the rise and fall of his breathing, feeling more alone than ever. Tomorrow, I promised myself, we'd talk tomorrow, and somehow we'd find a way through this. We had to. I stared at the credit card statement in disbelief, my hands shaking. "Eli, what is this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He glanced up from his phone, looking annoyed. "What's what?" I thrust the paper at him. "This! A $5,000 watch? Designer suits? Eli, we can't afford this." He shrugged, turning back to his phone. "Relax, Jenna. I got a big commission last month. We're fine." "We're not fine," I insisted, feeling my frustration mount. "We're living with your mother because we're supposed to be saving money, remember?" Eli's eyes flashed. "Maybe if you contributed more to our finances, we wouldn't have to worry so much." The words hit me like a slap. "Excuse me, I work just as hard as you do." "Please," he scoffed. "Playing gym teacher to bored housewives isn't exactly bringing in the big bucks, is it?" Before I could respond, Evelyn glided into the room. "Is everything all right, dears?" I heard raised voices. Eli's demeanor changed instantly. "Everything's fine, Mom. Jenna's just a little stressed about money." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Oh, I thought you two were doing so well. Eli's been working so hard." I bit my tongue, knowing anything I said would be twisted. It's nothing, Evelyn. Just a misunderstanding. She patted my arm condescendingly. Don't worry, dear. I'm sure Eli will take care of everything. He always does. As she left, I turned back to Eli. We need to talk about this. Seriously. He stood up, grabbing his keys. Not now, Jenna. I'm meeting the guys for drinks. Drinks? I sputtered. After what I just showed you? He was already halfway out the door. We'll talk later, okay? The front door slammed, leaving me alone with my anger and frustration. I paced the living room, trying to calm down. This wasn't like Eli. He'd always been responsible with money before. What had changed? My eyes fell on a framed photo of Eli and his parents. Evelyn's smug smile seemed to mock me. Of course. She'd been pushing Eli to live up to his potential ever since we moved in. Apparently, that meant spending money we didn't have. The next morning, I cornered Eli before he left for work. We need to talk about last night. He sighed, checking his watch. Can't this wait? I'm running late. No, it can't, I said firmly. Eli, we're in serious trouble here. These credit card bills, the constant spending, it has to stop. He ran a hand through his hair. What do you want me to say, Jenna? I'm providing for us. Isn't that what you wanted? I want us to be partners, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. To make decisions together. This isn't you, Eli. What's really going on? For a moment I saw a flicker of the man I married in his eyes. Then Evelyn's voice called from the kitchen. Eli, darling, don't forget your lunch. Just like that, the moment was gone. Eli's face hardened. I have to go. We'll talk about this later. But we didn't. Days passed, and Eli avoided any serious conversation. The credit card bills kept coming, each one worse than the last. I felt like I was drowning, watching helplessly as our future slipped away. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I confronted Eli one night after dinner, while Evelyn was out at her book club. This has to stop, I said, laying out all the bills on the coffee table. We're drowning in debt, Eli. And for what? To impress your mother? His face flushed with anger. Don't bring my mother into this. She has nothing to do with it. She has everything to do with it, I shouted, my composure finally breaking. Ever since we moved in, you've been different, reckless, irresponsible. This isn't you, Eli. What happened to our plans, our future? For a long moment, he was silent. Then, in a voice I barely recognized, he said, Maybe our plans have changed. Maybe this is who I really am, Jenna. Did you ever think of that? I stared at him, feeling as if I was looking at a stranger. If that's true, I said quietly, then I don't know who you are anymore. As I turned to leave the room, I heard him mutter, Maybe you never did. I paused in the doorway, my heart breaking. How had we come to this? And more importantly, where do we go from here? I took a deep breath, steeling myself before knocking on Evelyn's bedroom door. It was time to address this mess head-on. Come in, she called, her voice syrupy sweet. I stepped inside, finding Evelyn at her vanity, applying lipstick with practiced precision. Evelyn, we need to talk about the family finances. She raised an eyebrow, meeting my eyes in the mirror. Oh? And what would you know about our family finances, dear? I bit back a retort, reminding myself to stay calm. I've seen the credit card statements, Evelyn. The spending is out of control. We need to rein it in before. We? She interrupted, swiveling to face me. There is no we when it comes to this family's money, Jenna. That's between Eli and me. I'm Eli's wife, I said, my voice rising despite my best efforts. His finances are my finances. Evelyn's laugh was cold and brittle. Oh, you'd like that, wouldn't you, to get your hands on our family's hard-earned money? That's not what this is about, I insisted. We're drowning in debt, Evelyn. Can't you see that? She stood, her eyes flashing with anger. What I see is a gold digger trying to control my son. Eli knows what he's doing. He's a Bradshaw, after all. Being a Bradshaw doesn't make him immune to financial ruin, I shouted, my composure finally breaking. Evelyn's hand connected with my cheek before I could react. The slap echoed in the sudden silence. How dare you, she hissed. Get out of my room! Get out of my house! I stumbled backward, my hand on my stinging cheek. This is my house, too, I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Evelyn advanced on me, her face twisted with rage. This will never be your house. You'll never be a true Bradshaw. Eli will see that soon enough. I fled the room, slamming the door behind me. My heart raced as I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath. This was worse than I'd imagined. How had things spiraled so far out of control? That night, I lay awake long after Eli had fallen asleep. His soft snores felt like a betrayal. How could he sleep so peacefully while our world was crumbling? The next morning, I made a decision. If Eli and Evelyn wouldn't listen to reason, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. I made an appointment with a financial advisor, gathering every scrap of financial information I could find. As I sat in the sleek office, laying out our dire situation, I felt a glimmer of hope for the first time in weeks. "Mrs. Bradshaw," the advisor said, her face grave, "I won't sugarcoat this. Your financial situation is precarious at best." I nodded, unsurprised. "What can we do?" She outlined a strict budget, debt consolidation plans, and potential lifestyle changes. It wouldn't be easy, but it was a path forward. Armed with this information, I returned home, ready to confront Eli and Evelyn once and for all. But as I walked through the front door, I froze. Eli and Evelyn sat in the living room, their faces somber. Between them on the coffee table lay a stack of papers. "Jenna," Eli said, his voice oddly flat, "we need to talk." Evelyn's smile was triumphant as she pushed the papers towards me. "It's time to face facts, dear. This marriage isn't working." My hands shook as I picked up the top sheet. Divorce papers, already signed by Eli. I looked at my husband, searching for any sign of the man I'd married. "Eli, what is this?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "I'm sorry, Jenna. Mom's right. This just isn't working anymore." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I gripped the back of a chair to steady myself. "You're choosing her over me? Over us?" Eli's silence was all the answer I needed. Evelyn stood, placing a hand on Eli's shoulder. "It's for the best, dear. You'll see that in time." I stared at them, this united front against me. In that moment, something inside me hardened. "You want a divorce?" I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Fine, you'll get one. But don't think for a second this is over." I turned and walked out, leaving them stunned in my wake. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange mix of despair and determination. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning of a new chapter, one where I'd fight for myself, and only myself. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the divorce papers before me. The house was eerily quiet. Eli had left for work, and Evelyn was at her weekly bridge game. It was just me and this stack of papers that represented the end of my marriage. My hand trembled as I picked up the pen. Was I really going to do this? Sign away 5 years of my life without a fight? A memory flashed through my mind. Eli and me on our wedding day, full of hope and dreams for our future. What had happened to those two people? The front door opened, startling me. Eli walked in, his tie loosened and his hair disheveled. "Jenna," he said, his voice hoarse. "We need to talk." I gestured to the papers. "I think everything's been said, don't you?" He sat across from me, his eyes red-rimmed. "I'm sorry, I never meant for things to get this bad." "Then why did you sign these?" I asked, my voice cracking despite my efforts to stay calm. Eli ran a hand through his hair. "Mom, she convinced me it was for the best. Said you were only after our money, that you'd leave me once you got what you wanted." I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. "And you believed her, after everything we've been through together?" "I don't know what to believe anymore," he admitted, "but I do know I still love you, Jenna." For a moment, hope fluttered in my chest. Then I remembered the cold calculation in Evelyn's eyes when she handed me these papers. "If you love me, why didn't you stand up to your mother? Why didn't you fight for us?" Eli's silence was deafening. I stood up, suddenly furious. "You know what? I'm done. I'm done being the only one fighting for this marriage. I'm done being treated like an intruder in my own home." I grabbed the pen and scrawled my signature across the bottom of the divorce papers. "There. You're free now, Eli. Free to be the son your mother always wanted." Eli's face crumpled. "Jenna, please. We can work this out." But I was beyond listening. I stormed upstairs and started throwing clothes into a suitcase. Eli followed, pleading with me to stay, to talk things through. His words washed over me, meaningless after months of neglect and betrayal. As I zipped up my suitcase, Evelyn's voice rang out from downstairs. "Eli? Darling, are you home early?" Eli's face paled. "Mom, wait." But Evelyn was already in the doorway, taking in the scene before her. Her eyes narrowed as they landed on my suitcase. "What's going on here?" I shouldered past her, dragging my suitcase behind me. "Congratulations, Evelyn. You got what you wanted. I'm leaving." Evelyn's triumphant smile made my blood boil. It's for the best, dear, you'll see that in time. I whirled to face her. No, Evelyn. What I see is a bitter, manipulative woman who can't stand the thought of her son having a life outside of her control. And you, I turned to Eli, who looked shell-shocked. You're so weak you can't even stand up to your own mother. Evelyn gasped. How dare you? No, how dare you, I interrupted. You've torn apart a marriage because of your own insecurities. I hope you're happy together. I stormed down the stairs, my heart pounding. As I reached for the front door, Eli's hand caught my arm. Jenna, please, he begged. Don't go, we can fix this. I looked into his eyes, searching for the man I'd fallen in love with, but all I saw was a reflection of Evelyn's manipulations. It's too late, Eli, I said softly. You made your choice. Now I'm making mine. I pulled away from him and walked out the door, leaving behind the suffocating world of the Bradshaws. As I threw my suitcase into the trunk of my car, a strange sense of calm washed over me. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning. And for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. As I drove away, I made a silent vow to myself. I would rebuild my life on my terms, and I would never again let anyone make me feel small or unworthy. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear. I was finally free. 6 months after walking out of Eli and Evelyn's lives, I stood in front of the mirror, barely recognizing the woman staring back at me. Gone was the timid, self-doubting Jenna who had let herself be pushed around. In her place stood a confident, successful business owner. My personal training business had taken off, and I'd just signed the lease on my own studio space. Life was good, or at least it was getting there. The sharp trill of my phone cut through my thoughts. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. Jenna? Eli's voice, ragged and desperate, filled the line. I need your help. I gripped the phone tighter. Eli, what's wrong? Everything, he choked out. The business, it's gone. I'm in trouble, Jenna, serious trouble. My heart raced. Despite everything, a part of me still cared. What kind of trouble? Financial, legal. I made some bad decisions. Mom's furious. She's cut me off completely. I closed my eyes, fighting the urge to rush to his rescue. I'm sorry to hear that, Eli, but I don't see how I can help. Please, he begged. Just, can we meet? I need to explain in person. Against my better judgment, I agreed. An hour later, I sat across from Eli in a quiet cafe. He looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his designer clothes rumpled and stained. I messed up, Jenna, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. After you left, I threw myself into work, made some risky investments, used company money to cover personal debts. I felt sick. How bad is it? Bad enough that I might go to jail. He reached across the table, grabbing my hand. I need money, Jenna, to pay back what I took, to hire a good lawyer. You're the only one I can turn to. I pulled my hand away, shock turning to anger. You're unbelievable, you know that? You throw me away like I'm nothing, and now you want me to bail you out? I know I don't deserve it, he said, tears in his eyes. But I'm desperate. Mom won't help. She says I've brought shame on the family name. A bitter laugh escaped me. And what about me, Eli? What about the shame and humiliation you put me through? He hung his head. I'm sorry. I was weak. I let Mom manipulate me. I see that now. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy. Then I remembered the coldness in his eyes when he'd handed me those divorce papers. No, I said, my voice firm. I won't help you, Eli. You made your choices. Now you have to live with them. I stood to leave, but his next words stopped me cold. If you don't help me, I'll have to drag you into this, he said, desperation making his voice ugly. We were still married when some of this happened. You could be implicated too. I stared at him, disbelief turning to fury. Are you threatening me? He backpedaled quickly. No. I don't know what else to do. In that moment, I saw Eli clearly for the first time. Not as the charming man I'd fallen in love with or the weak-willed son Evelyn had molded, but as a desperate, cornered animal willing to do anything to save himself. Goodbye, Eli, I said, my voice cold. Don't contact me again. As I walked out of the cafe, my phone buzzed with a text. It was from my lawyer, confirming our appointment to discuss finalizing the divorce. I took a deep breath, squaring my shoulders. I'd worked too hard to let Eli drag me back to his mess. It was time to cut all ties, once and for all. But as I drove home, doubt crept in. What if Eli wasn't bluffing? Could I really be implicated in his financial misdeeds? And more importantly, was I strong enough to stand my ground if he came after me? I gripped the steering wheel tighter, determination setting in. I'd fought too hard for my independence to give it up now. Whatever Eli threw at me, I'd face it head on. It was time to show the Bradshaws and myself just how strong I'd become. I stood outside the imposing Bradshaw mansion, my heart pounding. It had been months since I'd last seen this place, but today I wasn't here as the meek daughter-in-law. I was here to demand what was rightfully mine. Taking a deep breath, I rang the doorbell. Moments later, Evelyn answered, her eyes widening in surprise. "Jenna, what are you doing here?" I pushed past her into the foyer. "Where's Eli? We need to talk." Evelyn's face hardened. "Eli's not here, and you're not welcome." "Save it, Evelyn," I interrupted. "I know about the debts. I know about everything." Her composure slipped for a moment before she regained control. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play dumb," I snapped. "Eli's been using my name on loan applications. Did you know that? Or did you conveniently overlook it when you were pushing him to spend beyond his means?" Evelyn's face paled. "That's ridiculous. Eli would never." "But he did," I said, pulling out a stack of papers from my bag. "And now I'm on the hook for hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt that you two racked up." Just then, Eli stumbled into the room looking disheveled and hungover. "Jenna, what's going on?" I turned to face him, my anger reaching a boiling point. "What's going on is that you've royally screwed us both, Eli. Did you think I wouldn't find out about the loans? The credit cards?" Eli's face crumpled. I was going to tell you. I just needed more time." "Time for what?" I demanded. "To dig us into an even deeper hole?" Evelyn stepped between us. "Now let's all calm down. I'm sure we can work this out like adults." I laughed bitterly. "Oh, now you want to be reasonable? Where was this attitude when you were poisoning Eli against me? When you were pushing him to spend money we didn't have?" "I was only trying to protect our family," Evelyn said, her voice trembling. "Protect?" I spat. "You've destroyed it. And now you're both going to make this right." I laid out my demands. Eli would take full responsibility for the debts, clearing my name from all financial obligations. In return, I wouldn't press charges for fraud. Eli nodded meekly, but Evelyn bristled. "You can't do this. We'll fight you every step of the way." "Go ahead," I challenged. "I have nothing left to lose. But you? Your precious family name will be dragged through the mud. Is that what you want, Evelyn?" For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. She turned to Eli. "Don't listen to her. We can find another way." But Eli shook his head. "No, Mom. Jenna's right. I messed up, big time. It's time I faced the consequences." Evelyn's face contorted with rage. "After everything I've done for you? You ungrateful." "Enough," I shouted, silencing them both. "Here's what's going to happen. Eli, you're going to sign these papers taking full responsibility for the debts. Evelyn, you're going to use your connections to help clear my name. And then I never want to hear from either of you again. Are we clear?" The silence that followed was deafening. Eli nodded slowly, reaching for the pen. But as he was about to sign, Evelyn made a last, desperate move. "Wait," she cried. What if we offered you money to make this all go away?" I stared at her, disbelief turning to disgust. "You still don't get it, do you? This isn't about money. It's about doing what's right." With shaking hands, Eli signed the papers. As I gathered them up, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. But the battle wasn't over yet. I turned to leave, but Evelyn's voice stopped me. "This isn't over, Jenna. You'll regret this." I met her gaze, unflinching. "No, Evelyn. The only thing I regret is not standing up to you sooner." As I walked out of the Bradshaw mansion for the last time, I knew the hardest part was yet to come. The papers were signed, but would Eli and Evelyn follow through? Or was this just the beginning of an even bigger fight? I squared my shoulders, ready to face whatever came next. I'd found my strength, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it away from me again. I stood behind the counter of my newly opened fitness studio, surveying the bustling space with a sense of pride. Months of hard work had paid off, and my business was thriving. As I watched a group of women laughing during their cool-down stretches, I felt a warmth in my chest. This was what success felt like. The bell above the door chimed, and I froze. Evelyn Bradshaw stood in the entrance, looking as polished and imperious as ever. "Jenna, dear," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. What a lovely little gym you have here. I steeled myself, forcing a neutral expression. Evelyn, what are you doing here? She glided towards me, her eyes scanning the room. Can't a mother-in-law visit? We have so much to discuss. Ex-mother-in-law, I corrected. And we have nothing to discuss. The divorce is final. Evelyn's smile tightened. About that, I think we may have been hasty in our judgments. I raised an eyebrow. We? Eli misses you terribly, she continued, ignoring my interruption. And I've come to see that perhaps I was mistaken about you. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Mistaken? You tried to destroy me, Evelyn. You and Eli both. She waved a hand dismissively. Water under the bridge, dear. The important thing is we want you back in the family. I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. You can't be serious. I'm always serious when it comes to family, Evelyn said, her eyes glinting. And let's be honest, Jenna, you've done well for yourself, but wouldn't you rather have the Bradshaw name and fortune behind you again? The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This isn't about reconciliation. This is about money. Evelyn's mask slipped for a moment, revealing a flash of desperation. The family business is struggling. Eli's missteps have cost us dearly, but with your success, your connections in the fitness world, you want to use me to save your family's reputation, I said, disgust rising in my throat. Think of it as a mutually beneficial arrangement, Evelyn pressed. You'd have everything you ever wanted, the wealth, the status, the family. For a split second I faltered. The idea of never having to worry about money again was tempting. But then I remembered the endless nights of tears, the constant belittling, the betrayal. No, I said, my voice firm. I don't want any of that. Not anymore. Evelyn's face hardened. Don't be a fool, Jenna. You'll never have an opportunity like this again. Good, I shot back, because I don't need your money or your name. I've built something for myself, something real, and I won't let you take that away from me. She leaned in close, her voice dropping to a hiss. You ungrateful little gold digger. You think you can turn your back on the Bradshaws? We made you. I stood my ground, meeting her gaze. No, Evelyn, you tried to break me, but I remade myself. The bell chimed again, and Eli walked in, looking sheepish. Mom, what's going on? I turned to him, my resolve strengthening. Your mother was just leaving, and so are you. Eli's face fell. Jenna, please, we can work this out. I've changed, I swear. It's too late, I said, my voice steady. I've moved on, and it's time you both did too. Evelyn grabbed Eli's arm, her face a mask of fury. Come, Eli, we don't need her. We'll find another way. As they stormed out, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I'd faced my demons and come out stronger. But as I turned back to my studio, a nagging doubt crept in. Would the Bradshaws really let this go? Or was this just the calm before an even bigger storm? I shook off the thought, focusing on the women still working out, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded. Whatever came next, I was ready. I'd fought too hard for my independence to let anyone take it away now. As I rejoined my class, guiding them through their final stretches, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in years, I was truly free. And no amount of money or status could ever compare to that feeling. I sat in my doctor's office, staring at the ultrasound image in my hands. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind, filling me with a mixture of joy and trepidation. As I walked out into the bright sunlight, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Bradshaw family empire crumbles. CEO Eli Bradshaw arrested for fraud. My heart raced as I clicked on the article. There, in stark black and white, was the story of Eli and Evelyn's downfall. The family business had collapsed under the weight of Eli's mismanagement and fraudulent activities. Evelyn, it seemed, had suffered a stress-induced stroke and was now in a long-term care facility. A part of me felt a twisted satisfaction. Wasn't this what I had wanted? To see them suffer as I had? But as I placed a hand on my still flat stomach, I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. This wasn't justice. It was tragedy. My phone rang, startling me. It was Eli. Jenna. His voice was broken, desperate. I know I have no right to ask, but I need help. Mom's medical bills, the legal fees. I don't know what to do. I closed my eyes, torn between compassion and self-preservation. I'm sorry, Eli, but I can't get involved, not anymore. Please, he begged. You're the only one who ever truly cared about us, about me. The old Jenna would have caved, would have rushed to his rescue, but I wasn't that woman anymore. No, Eli, I said firmly. You're right, I did care, but you and Evelyn threw that away. I've moved on, and it's time you did too. As I ended the call, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. For so long I had carried the burden of their expectations, their judgments, but now I was free. I walked to the park near my apartment, settling on a bench to watch children play. My hand rested on my stomach, and I thought about the future stretching out before me, a future I had built for myself, brick by brick. Is this seat taken? I looked up to see Mark, my neighbor and friend, smiling down at me. Over the past few months, he had become a constant source of support and laughter in my life. It's all yours, I said, patting the spot next to me. As he sat down, I felt a flutter in my chest that had nothing to do with morning sickness. Mark, I have something to tell you. His eyes met mine, warm and understanding. I'm listening. Taking a deep breath, I shared my news. To my surprise and delight, his face lit up with joy. Jenna, that's wonderful, he exclaimed, taking my hand in his. I know we haven't talked about us, about where this is going, but I want you to know I'm here for you, for both of you if you'll have me. Tears welled up in my eyes as I squeezed his hand. I'd like that, very much. As we sat there planning and dreaming, I thought about the journey that had brought me to this moment. The pain, the betrayal, the struggle to find myself again. But also the strength I had discovered, the resilience I had built. The Bradshaws' world might have crumbled, but mine was just beginning to bloom. And as I looked at Mark, at the future we might build together, I realized that true wealth had nothing to do with money or status. It was about love, trust, and the family we choose for ourselves. My phone buzzed again. Another news alert about the Bradshaws' downfall. But this time, I ignored it. Their story was no longer mine to carry. I had my own story to write now, a new chapter filled with hope and possibility. As Mark and I left the park hand in hand, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. The past was behind me, and the future, full of promise, lay ahead. Whatever challenges came next, I knew I had the strength to face them. Not as Jenna Bradshaw, the scorned wife, but as Jenna, the woman who had reclaimed her life and found her own path to happiness. And that, I realized, was the sweetest revenge of all. I smoothed my skirt and took a deep breath, steeling myself for another one of Cecilia's impromptu visits. The doorbell chimed, and I plastered on a smile before opening the door. Laura, thank goodness you're home. Cecilia burst in, her designer purse swinging wildly. I'm in such a pickle, and I didn't know who else to turn to. I bit back a sigh. What's wrong this time, Cecilia? She collapsed dramatically onto my couch. It's the mortgage. I'm behind again, and they're threatening foreclosure. I just need a little help to tide me over. I perched on the edge of an armchair, my patience wearing thin. Cecilia, we've been through this before. Ethan and I can't keep bailing you out. But your family? She wailed. What am I supposed to do? Before I could respond, my cell phone rang. I glanced at the caller ID and felt a wave of relief. I'm sorry, Cecilia, but I need to take this. It's my father. I stepped into the kitchen, grateful for the interruption. Hi, Dad. How are you feeling? Laura, sweetheart. My father's voice was uncharacteristically serious. I need you to come over. There's something important we need to discuss. A chill ran down my spine. Is everything okay? Just come as soon as you can, he said, then hung up. I returned to the living room, where Cecilia was rifling through her purse. I'm sorry, but I have to go. My father needs me. Cecilia's head snapped up. But what about my situation? We'll talk later, I said firmly, ushering her towards the door. I really have to go. As I drove to my father's house, my mind raced. What could be so urgent? Dad had always been the picture of health, but lately he'd seemed more tired than usual. I pulled into the driveway and hurried inside. Dad, where are you? In here, Laura, he called from the study. I found him sitting behind his desk, looking older than I'd ever seen him. What's going on, Dad? You're scaring me. He gestured for me to sit. I'm afraid I have some bad news, sweetheart. I've been to see Dr. Jameson, and, well, it's not good. My heart dropped. What do you mean? I have cancer, Laura, and it's advanced. They're giving me 6 months, maybe a year. The world tilted on its axis. No, I whispered. There must be some mistake. We'll get a second opinion, try different treatments. Dad reached across the desk and took my hand. I've already done all that. It's time to face facts, but that's not why I called you here. I blinked back tears. What do you mean? He pulled out a thick folder. I need to get my affairs in order, and there are some things you need to know. I've made some investments over the years, properties and such. I want to make sure you're taken care of after I'm gone. Dad, stop, I pleaded. I don't want to talk about this. We have to, Laura. You need to be prepared. As he started explaining about bank accounts and real estate holdings, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Where are you? Cecilia's upset. What happened? I ignored it, trying to focus on my father's words. But my mind was reeling. How could this be happening? And how was I going to tell Ethan? Dad must have sensed my distraction. We can go over the details later. For now, just know that everything's taken care of. You won't have to worry. I nodded numbly, still struggling to process it all. As I stood to leave, Dad pulled me into a tight hug. We'll get through this, sweetheart, he murmured. Together. I clung to him, wishing I could freeze this moment and make time stand still. But as I pulled away, I knew nothing would ever be the same again. Driving home, I felt like I was in a fog. How could I face Ethan and Cecilia with this news? How could I face anyone? As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Cecilia's car still parked out front. My heart sank. I wasn't ready for this. I wasn't ready for any of it. Taking a deep breath, I stepped out of the car and walked towards the house, bracing myself for whatever came next. The day of Dad's funeral dawned gray and somber, matching my mood perfectly. I stood in front of the mirror, adjusting my black dress, when Ethan appeared behind me. You ready? He asked, his hand on my shoulder. I nodded, not trusting my voice. As we drove to the church, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The service was a blur of tears and whispered condolences. I barely registered the words of the eulogy, focusing instead on the framed photo of Dad next to his casket. He looked so alive, so vibrant. How could he be gone? As we gathered at the cemetery, Cecilia sidled up to me. Laura, I'm so sorry for your loss, she said, her voice dripping with sympathy. Your father was such a generous man. I'm sure he made sure you were well taken care of. I stiffened, shocked by her brazenness. Before I could respond, Ethan pulled me away. Not now, he muttered. Back at the house, I retreated to Dad's study, needing a moment alone. I ran my fingers over his desk, remembering our last conversation. The folder he'd shown me was still there, tucked away in a drawer. A knock at the door startled me. It was Mr. Jameson, Dad's lawyer. Laura, I'm sorry to disturb you, but there are some matters we need to discuss, he said gently. I nodded, gesturing for him to sit. What is it? He pulled out a thick envelope. Your father's will. He was very specific about his wishes. As Mr. Jameson began reading, I felt a mix of emotions wash over me. Dad had left me everything. The house, his savings, even a few properties I didn't know he owned. There's one more thing, Mr. Jameson said, handing me a sealed letter. Your father wanted you to have this privately. I took it with trembling hands, but before I could open it, the door burst open. Ethan and Cecilia stood there, their eyes wide. What's going on? Ethan demanded. Mr. Jameson stood. I was just going over Harold's will with Laura, if you'll excuse us. No, Cecilia interrupted. We're family. We should hear this too. I felt a surge of anger. This is private, Cecilia. Please leave. Ethan stepped forward. Laura, don't you think we should discuss this as a family? After all, what affects you affects me too. I stared at him, suddenly seeing him in a new light. What exactly are you implying, Ethan? Before he could answer, Cecilia chimed in. We're just concerned, Laura. You've been through so much. You shouldn't have to deal with all this alone. I stood up, clutching Dad's letter to my chest. I'm not alone. I have my father's memory and his wishes to guide me. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need some time to myself. I brushed past them, ignoring their protests. In the sanctuary of my bedroom, I finally opened Dad's letter with shaking hands. My dearest Laura, it began. If you're reading this, it means I'm gone. But I want you to know that I've made arrangements to protect you and your inheritance. Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart. Tears blurred my vision as I read on. Dad had suspected that Ethan and Cecilia might try to take advantage of the situation. He'd set up trusts and legal safeguards to ensure that his legacy remained mine alone. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Laura? It was Ethan. We need to talk about the will. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. As I reached for the doorknob, I realized that the battle for my father's legacy and my own future was just beginning. "Coming," I called out, tucking the letter safely away. Whatever happened next, I knew I had to stay strong, for Dad and for myself. The incessant ringing of the doorbell jolted me awake. I glanced at the clock. 7:30 a.m.? Who could it be at this hour? Ethan was already gone, having left early for a business meeting. I threw on a robe and hurried downstairs, only to find Cecilia on my doorstep, looking frazzled. "Laura, thank goodness you're home," she exclaimed, barging past me. "I'm in dire straits. The bank is threatening to repossess my car." I sighed, closing the door. "Cecilia, it's barely morning. Couldn't this wait?" She whirled around, eyes wide. "Wait, Laura, I could lose my car today. I need your help. Just a small loan to tide me over." The audacity of her request so soon after Dad's funeral made my blood boil. "Cecilia, I'm still grieving. I can't deal with your financial problems right now." "But you have all that money now," she pressed. "Surely you can spare some for family?" I felt a surge of anger. "That's enough. My inheritance is not your personal piggy bank. I think you should leave." Cecilia's face hardened. "I see how it is. You get a windfall and suddenly you're too good for family. Ethan will hear about this." As I watched her storm out, I realized the peace I'd hoped for after Dad's passing was slipping further away. Later that afternoon, as I sorted through Dad's belongings, my phone buzzed. It was an email from my old high school announcing an upcoming reunion. I hesitated, then decided to RSVP. Maybe a night out would do me good. Just then, Ethan walked in, looking tired. "Hey," he said, kissing my cheek. "How was your day?" I debated whether to mention Cecilia's visit, but decided against it. "Fine. Just going through some of Dad's things. How was your meeting?" He shrugged, loosening his tie. Same old, same old. "Listen, I was thinking we should talk about the inheritance. Maybe consider investing some of it." I felt my guard go up. "I'm not ready to make any decisions yet, Ethan. It's too soon." He frowned. "Laura, we can't just sit on that kind of money. We need to be smart about this." "We," I echoed. "Dad left it to me, Ethan. I'll decide what to do with it when I'm ready." The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but his phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then back at me. "We'll discuss this later. I have to take this call." As he hurried out, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Why was he so interested in my inheritance? The next morning, I woke to find Ethan already gone again. There was a note on the kitchen counter. "Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight." Feeling restless, I decided to visit one of the properties Dad had left me, a small apartment building across town. As I pulled up, I noticed a familiar car parked outside. Cecilia's. Confused, I made my way to the building's office. The door was ajar, and I could hear voices inside. "She's being so stubborn," Cecilia was saying. "We need to find a way to convince her to share the inheritance." "Patience," a male voice replied. It took me a moment to recognize it as Ethan's. "We'll get what's ours. Just stick to the plan." I stumbled backward, my mind reeling. Ethan and Cecilia were plotting against me? How long had this been going on? As I turned to leave, my foot caught on a loose floorboard. The resulting creak seemed to echo through the hallway. "Did you hear that?" Cecilia's voice was sharp with alarm. I held my breath, pressing myself against the wall. Footsteps approached the door. "Hello?" Ethan called out. "Is someone there?" My heart pounding, I realized I had a choice to make. Confront them now, or retreat and plan my next move carefully. Either way, I knew one thing for certain. Nothing would ever be the same again. I smoothed my dress nervously as I entered the high school gymnasium. The reunion was in full swing, a sea of familiar yet changed faces. I'd come here hoping for a distraction from the mess at home, but now I felt overwhelmed. "Laura? Laura Thompson, is that you?" I turned to see a vaguely familiar face. "It's Laura Prescott now, but yes, I'm sorry, I don't." "Peter Caldwell," he said, grinning widely. "We had chemistry together. Well, the class, not, you know." I forced a polite smile, memories flooding back. Peter had always been a bit intense. "Of course, Peter. How are you?" "Oh, I'm great," he said, edging closer. "But wow, look at you. You haven't aged a day." I took a step back, feeling uncomfortable. "That's kind of you to say. If you'll excuse me, I need to." "Wait," Peter said, grabbing my arm. "I've always regretted not telling you how I felt back then. I had such a crush on you, Laura." I gently but firmly removed his hand. "Peter, that was a long time ago. I'm married now." His eyes narrowed. "Married? To who?" "Ethan Prescott," I said, scanning the room for an escape route. Peter's face darkened. Prescott? As in Cecilia Prescott's brother? I froze. You know Cecilia? He laughed bitterly. Oh, I know her all right. She's been stringing me along for months, always needing favors, but now I see what's really going on. My heart raced. What do you mean? Peter leaned in, his breath hot on my ear. Your husband and his sister are planning something, Laura, and it involves you. I stumbled back, my mind reeling. You're lying. Why should I believe you? Because I can prove it, he said, pulling out his phone. Cecilia's been careless, left some interesting texts on my phone when she borrowed it. With shaking hands, I took the phone. What I saw made my blood run cold. Messages between Cecilia and Ethan discussing ways to access my inheritance, plans to manipulate me to push me to make rash decisions. This can't be real, I whispered. Peter's eyes gleamed with a mix of sympathy and something else. Excitement? Oh, it's real, all right. And there's more where that came from. I handed the phone back, feeling sick. Why are you showing me this? He shrugged. Maybe I still have a soft spot for you, or maybe I'm just tired of being Cecilia's puppet. Either way, you deserve to know. I nodded numbly, my mind racing. What was I going to do with this information? Peter touched my arm again. Listen, Laura, I can help you. We could team up, get back at them both. What do you say? I stared at him, suddenly seeing the situation clearly. Peter wasn't my savior, he was just another player in this twisted game, but he had given me valuable information, whether he meant to or not. Thank you for telling me, Peter, I said carefully, but I need to handle this on my own. His face fell. But Laura. No, I said firmly, this is my fight. Please don't contact me again. As I walked away, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. Where are you? We need to talk about the inheritance. It's important. I took a deep breath, making a decision. It was time to stop reacting and start taking control. I would play along for now, gather more evidence. And then, when the time was right, I would confront them all. I texted back, on my way home. You're right. We have a lot to discuss. As I left the reunion, I felt a strange mix of dread and determination. The game had changed, and now I knew the rules. It was time to start playing to win. I stepped out of my office building, exhausted after a long day of work. As I fumbled for my car keys, a familiar voice made me freeze. Laura, fancy seeing you here. I turned slowly, my heart sinking. Peter stood there, grinning as if we were old friends. Peter, what are you doing here? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, stepping closer. I was in the neighborhood, thought I'd say hi. How did you know where I work? I demanded, alarm bells ringing in my head. Oh, I have my ways, he said with a wink. Listen, I've been thinking about our conversation at the reunion. I really think we should talk more about Ethan and Cecilia. I backed away, clutching my purse tightly. I told you, I'm handling it myself. Please leave me alone. His face darkened. You're making a mistake, Laura. You need me. Before I could respond, a coworker walked by, giving us a curious look. I forced a smile and turned back to Peter. I have to go. Don't come here again. As I drove home, my mind raced. How had Peter found me, and what would he do next? The next morning, I woke to find Ethan already gone. There was a note on the kitchen counter. Early meeting. Don't wait up tonight. I sighed, realizing how common these early meetings had become. As I sipped my coffee, movement outside caught my eye. I peered through the window and nearly dropped my mug. Peter was standing across the street, staring at our house. My hands shaking, I called Ethan. It went straight to voicemail. Ethan, call me as soon as you get this. It's urgent. I paced the living room, debating what to do. Should I call the police? But what would I say? That my husband's sister's ex-boyfriend was stalking me because of some convoluted inheritance scheme? A knock at the door made me jump. I approached cautiously, relief washing over me when I saw it was just the mailman. But as I opened the door, Peter appeared behind him. Special delivery, Peter said with a smirk, pushing past me into the house. Get out, I shouted, reaching for my phone. I'm calling the police. Peter held up his hands. Wait, I have proof of what Ethan and Cecilia are planning. Real proof this time. Despite my better judgment, I hesitated. What are you talking about? He pulled out a USB drive. Everything's on here. Bank statements, emails, recorded conversations. They're planning to have you declared mentally unfit, Laura, to take control of your inheritance. I felt the blood drain from my face. That's impossible. Ethan wouldn't. See for yourself, Peter said, offering me the drive. My hand trembled as I reached for it. Just then, I heard a key in the lock. Ethan's voice called out, "Laura? Whose car is that out front?" Peter's eyes widened. He shoved the USB drive into my hand and bolted for the back door. I quickly slipped the drive into my pocket as Ethan entered. "Laura, what's going on?" Ethan asked, looking around suspiciously. I took a deep breath, making a split-second decision. "Nothing, honey. Just got a bit of a fright from a door-to-door salesman. Everything's fine." Ethan relaxed slightly, but I could see doubt in his eyes. "All right. Listen, I was thinking we should have dinner with Cecilia tonight to discuss some family matters." I nodded, my mind racing. "Sure, that sounds great." As Ethan headed upstairs to change, I clutched the USB drive in my pocket. I had a choice to make. Trust Peter's evidence and confront Ethan and Cecilia? Or play along and try to uncover the truth myself? One thing was certain, tonight's dinner would change everything. And I had to be ready. The doorbell rang, and I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Cecilia's visit was no surprise. Ethan had arranged this family dinner after all. But the tension in the air was palpable as I opened the door. "Laura, darling," Cecilia exclaimed, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. She breezed past me, Ethan following close behind. As we settled in the living room, I couldn't help but notice the furtive glances Ethan and Cecilia exchanged. My hand instinctively went to my pocket, feeling the outline of the USB drive Peter had given me. "So, Laura," Cecilia began, her voice sickly sweet, "how have you been coping? It must be so difficult, dealing with your grief and all this newfound responsibility." I forced a smile. "I'm managing, thank you. Dad prepared me well." Ethan cleared his throat. "Speaking of which, Laura, we really need to discuss the inheritance. I've been thinking." "Actually," I interrupted, my heart racing, "I have something I'd like to discuss first." They both stared at me, surprise evident on their faces. I took a deep breath and pulled out my phone, bringing up the photos Peter had sent me. Pictures of Ethan and Cecilia meeting in secret, looking far too cozy. "Care to explain these?" I asked, my voice surprisingly steady. The color drained from Ethan's face. Cecilia let out a nervous laugh. "Oh, those? That's nothing, just a family meeting." "Stop lying," I snapped. "I know what you've been planning, trying to have me declared mentally unfit? Really?" Ethan stood up, his face a mask of anger. "Where did you get those photos? Have you been spying on us?" "That's rich, coming from you," I retorted. "I'm not the one plotting behind my spouse's back." Cecilia's demeanor changed in an instant. "You ungrateful bitch," she hissed. "After everything we've done for you." "Everything you've done?" I laughed bitterly. "You mean constantly begging for money? Trying to manipulate me out of my inheritance?" Ethan stepped forward, his eyes blazing. "You have no idea what you're talking about. We were trying to protect you, to make sure you didn't squander everything your father left you." "By having me declared incompetent?" I shot back. "Some protection." Suddenly Ethan's expression shifted. A slow, cruel smile spread across his face. "You want to play hardball, Laura? Fine, let's talk about your little rendezvous with Peter." My blood ran cold. "What?" He pulled out his phone, showing me a series of photos. Peter and me at the reunion, outside my office, even at our front door. "Looks like I'm not the only one with secrets," Ethan sneered. "That's not what it looks like," I stammered. "Peter's been stalking me. I was trying to handle it on my own." "Save it," Cecilia interjected. "We have all the evidence we need. How do you think it'll look to a judge when we show them these? A grieving widow, acting erratically, meeting strange men." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. They'd set me up. Peter, the photos, the USB drive, it was all part of their plan. "You won't get away with this," I said, my voice shaking. Ethan's laugh was cold. "We already have. Face it, Laura. You're out of your depth. Sign over control of the inheritance now, and we can avoid a messy public legal battle." I looked between them. These people I'd once considered family, now revealed as vultures circling their prey. In that moment, I felt more alone than ever. But then I remembered my father's words from his letter. "Trust your instincts, sweetheart. Not everyone has your best interests at heart." I straightened my spine, meeting their gazes head-on. "You're right about one thing," I said quietly. "This ends now, but not the way you think." I pulled out the USB drive, holding it up. "You're not the only ones with evidence, and unlike your fabricated photos, what's on here is real. So here's what's going to happen." as I laid out my terms, I saw the confidence drain from their faces. The game had changed, and for the first time I held all the cards. The battle for my father's legacy and my own future had reached its tipping point, and I was ready to fight. The morning after my confrontation with Ethan and Cecilia, I woke to an empty house and a text message from an unknown number. "Meet me at Riverside Park, 1 p.m. Come alone, Peter." My instincts screamed danger, but I knew I needed answers. I arrived at the park early, scanning the area for any sign of Ethan or Cecilia. Peter was already there, pacing nervously by the fountain. "Laura," he called out, relief evident in his voice. "I wasn't sure you'd come." I kept my distance, eyeing him warily. "Start talking, Peter. What's your role in all this?" He ran a hand through his hair, looking genuinely distressed. "I'm so sorry, Laura. I never meant for it to go this far. Cecilia, she blackmailed me. Said she'd ruin me if I didn't help set you up." "Why should I believe you?" I demanded. Peter pulled out his phone. "Because I recorded everything, every conversation, every plan they made. I couldn't go through with it anymore." As he played the recordings, my world tilted on its axis. Ethan's voice, cold and calculating, discussing ways to manipulate me. Cecilia, gleefully planning how they'd spend my inheritance once I was out of the picture. "Oh, God," I whispered, feeling sick. "How long has this been going on?" "Months," Peter admitted. "Since before your father passed. They've been planning this for a long time, Laura." I sank onto a nearby bench, my mind reeling. "Why come clean now?" Peter sat beside me, keeping a respectful distance, because I realized how wrong it was, and because I really did have feelings for you back in school. I couldn't be part of destroying your life. Just then, my phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Where are you? We need to talk. Come home now." I showed Peter the message, my heart racing. "What do I do?" He hesitated, then said, "Go. Act like nothing's changed. I'll send you copies of everything I have. Use it to protect yourself." I nodded, standing on shaky legs. "Thank you, Peter. I'm sorry I misjudged you." As I drove home, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions. Betrayal, anger, fear. But underneath it all, a steely determination was forming. I wouldn't be their victim any longer. Ethan was waiting when I walked in, his face a mask of concern. "Where have you been?" "I've been worried sick." I forced a smile. "Just needed some air to clear my head after last night." He nodded, reaching for my hand. I fought the urge to recoil. "I'm sorry about how things went. We all said things we didn't mean. But I think I have a solution." "Oh?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Ethan led me to the dining room where Cecilia was waiting with a stack of papers. My stomach dropped. "We've drawn up some documents," Ethan explained, "just to help manage the inheritance. For your own protection, of course." I glanced at the papers, recognizing power of attorney forms. They were really going through with it. "I don't know," I said, feigning uncertainty. "This is a big decision. Can I have some time to think about it?" Cecilia's smile was razor sharp. "Of course, dear, but don't take too long. We wouldn't want things to get messy." As they talked, outlining their plans for my father's legacy, I felt a calm settle over me. They thought they had won, but they had no idea what was coming. My phone buzzed quietly. Peter's files had arrived. I excused myself, retreating to the bathroom. As I scrolled through the damning evidence, a plan began to form. I looked at myself in the mirror, seeing a strength I hadn't known I possessed. "Game on," I whispered to my reflection. Returning to the dining room, I plastered on a smile. "All right," I said, picking up the pen. "Let's talk about these documents." Ethan and Cecilia exchanged triumphant glances, unaware that their carefully laid plans were about to come crashing down around them. The final act was about to begin, and I was ready to reclaim my life and my father's legacy, once and for all. I stood in the living room of Ethan's parents' house, my heart pounding but my resolve unshakable. Around me, the faces of the Prescott family, including Ethan and Cecilia, ranged from confused to suspicious. "Laura, dear," Ethan's mother began, "what's this all about? Why have you called us all here?" I took a deep breath. "I have something important to share with all of you, something that will change everything." Ethan stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Laura, whatever you're thinking—" "No," I cut him off firmly. "You've done enough talking. Now it's my turn." I pulled out my tablet and connected it to the TV. "What you're about to see and hear might shock you, but I assure you, it's all true. As I played the recordings Peter had given me, the room fell into stunned silence. Ethan and Cecilia's voices filled the air, detailing their plans to manipulate me, to steal my inheritance, to have me declared incompetent. Ethan's father stood up, his face red with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" "It means," I said, my voice steady, "that your son and daughter have been plotting against me since before my father died. They've lied, cheated, and manipulated everyone in this room." Cecilia lunged forward. "You bitch! You have no proof." "I have every proof," I interrupted, pulling out a stack of documents. "Bank statements showing mysterious transfers, emails detailing your plans, even a recorded confession from Peter about how you blackmailed him into helping you." The room erupted into chaos. Ethan's mother was sobbing, his father shouting. Cecilia was screaming denials, while Ethan stood frozen, his face ashen. I raised my voice above the din. "I'm not finished. There's more." I played the final recording, a conversation between Ethan and his mistress, planning their future with my money. The silence that followed was deafening. Ethan's father turned to him, his voice shaking with rage. "Is this true? Have you brought this disgrace upon our family?" Ethan's shoulders slumped in defeat. "Dad, I can explain." "Get out," his father growled. "Both of you. You're no longer welcome in this family." As Ethan and Cecilia were ushered out, hurling accusations and threats, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. It was over. Ethan's mother approached me, tears in her eyes. "Laura, I'm so sorry. We had no idea." I squeezed her hand gently. "I know. You're victims in this too." As I prepared to leave, Ethan's father stopped me. "What will you do now?" I smiled, feeling truly free for the first time in months. "I'm going to honor my father's legacy, the way he would have wanted." Driving home, I reflected on the whirlwind of events that had led to this moment. The betrayal, the pain, the fear, but also the strength I'd found within myself. I pulled into my driveway, noticing a familiar figure waiting on the porch. "Peter." "I heard what happened," he said as I approached. "Are you okay?" I nodded, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. "I am. Thank you for your help, Peter. I couldn't have done this without you." He shifted awkwardly. "Laura, I know I messed up before, but I was wondering." I held up a hand, stopping him. "Peter, I appreciate everything you've done, but right now I need to focus on myself, on healing." Understanding dawned in his eyes. He nodded, offering a small smile. "Of course. Take care of yourself, Laura." As I watched him walk away, I felt the last pieces of my old life falling away. I entered the house, my house now truly mine, and looked around. The rooms that had once felt suffocating now held promise. I picked up a framed photo of my father, tracing his smiling face. "I did it, Dad," I whispered. "I protected what you built, and I found myself along the way." Setting the photo down, I walked to the window and looked out at the setting sun. Tomorrow would bring new challenges as new opportunities, but for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face them. Not as a victim, not as someone's wife or daughter, but as Laura, strong, resilient, and finally truly free.